So last Sunday we heard about the miracle story of the feeding of the 5,000. Mark now goes on to tell us about another of Jesus' miracles, the time when he walked on water. And with Mark presenting us stories of miracles and healing coupled together, we can really see that Mark wants us to know who Jesus is. Mark wants us to know his identity. So let's go on to hear this story and make yourself comfortable, get a hot drink, cup of tea or coffee. Mark 65 reads, "After the meal, telling everyone goodbye, he went up into the hills by himself to pray." And during his whirlwind ministry in Galilee, Jesus intentionally sought time to be with God. And it's clearly something that we should be seeking out and prioritising ourselves. And many of us feel like we've got more time with staying at home, but our brains continue to respond and adapt to the change of routine, social distancing, and the turbulent events around us. And it's tiring. So stopping for a while and being present with God can calm us, strengthen our relationship with God, our minds and our bodies too. And right now, one of the ways we could embrace this national pause is by listening to God and reflecting on how we, our communities and our world functions. We can try to look out for how God is moving, how he's beckoning in his kingdom, and think about how we can join in. And Mark continues, "Late that night, the disciples were in the boat in the middle of the lake, and Jesus was alone on land. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and the waves." And we can feel like this a lot in life. We can feel at sea, adrift, tossing and turning, not in control, out of sorts. And I know many of us can connect with this image now. Ongoing rest, pause, social distancing, and change of routine are not easy experiences for lots of people. It's out of many comfort zones. And we can feel adrift in other seasons too, such as when we lose a job, when we're sick, when we experience broken relationships, when we perceive a lack of progress, we become discouraged. And amidst all this, it's easy to feel a sense of isolation, separated from God. We wonder where he could possibly be. And the psalmists cry out to God in these circumstances, and I hope that we can cry out to God too. God knows what's occurring in our lives. He is near. He is alert to us. And the story continues. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. Just imagine that you are with the disciples. Imagine seeing Jesus coming towards you, walking on the water. What might have the disciples been feeling? What thoughts were running through their heads? So, what a strange and amazing sight this must have been for them. In the dead of night, they see Jesus out of nowhere, walking on the water towards them. And the fact that he was doing this displayed his divinity. It displayed his identity. It was not ambiguous. He cared for the disciples when he went out there on the water in his power. And in the same way, he cares for us too. And I know lots of people are experiencing busy dreams at the moment, poor sleep. And it's of comfort to me personally to know that God is close when I'm tired and floundering, to know that God is in control, even if my dreams are not, and they're crazy. It's reassuring to remember who journeys with us in these times and in any other difficult circumstances and seasons. And the next sentence in the story is really quite striking, and perhaps you might feel on hearing it that you don't understand it, but there are many who don't. He intended to go past them. Now, there have been many theories on this phrase, but none of them really explains it away. The best one that I consider is that Jesus was reassuringly displaying his identity to the disciples. And similarly, in Exodus 33:19 to 34:7, Moses asks God to show him his glory, and God responds by passing before him and proclaiming his identity. And I see that Jesus' revelation of his glory is aimed at calming his disciples. Many say that we don't need commentaries or academics to help make sense of things in the Bible. We simply need the Bible. But this is just one example that shows our plain words aren't enough. And the story goes on. When they saw him walking on the water, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. They were all terrified when they saw him. And on hearing that, I completely empathise. I am not surprised by the disciples' reaction, as we said earlier. Are you? The figure was Jesus, and this display of power may have been intended to comfort and add confidence, but I think I would have responded in a much similar way. But this was not the reaction Jesus was aiming for. The disciples didn't recognize Jesus initially, and they became more afraid. But it's also just interesting to think that it was not long ago that they were in a similar situation on a boat in Galilee, in a storm. Jesus was actually on the boat with them from the start, and Jesus calmed the storm. And it's just interesting to reflect on the fact that they didn't seem to connect these two situations. They didn't seem to remember how Jesus had been with them, had moved in this difficult situation. That the disciples just continue not to really fully understand who Jesus was. So they could have cried out to him in faith, but instead they feared him. And Jesus reveals his presence and moves in ways we don't always expect. We often don't recognise him in our lives when we're caught up in difficulty. We're just so busy trying to move on, trying to do what we need to do to survive. We don't seek him out enough. We forget our faith and who God is, but we need him. Let's think back to the road to Emmaus, Luke 24:13 to 35. And the disciples recognise Jesus in retrospect, and this can happen to us too. We recognise in retrospect who it was that appeared in our lives. We can often recognise in retrospect that it was Jesus who appeared in our lives. And even now, at this strange time, God is revealing his presence to us and reminding us of who he is in the uncertainty. And it just draws on the need to just take note of what's going on around us. Take note of the small things. Take note of all the burning bushes around us. And just the other day, I was thinking that it was such a glorious evening, and I was reflecting on that word, glorious. And his creation is just one of the ways in which God displays his glory to us. And perhaps when we are on a daily walk, we can just take note of God's creation around us, the sights and the sounds and the smells, and remember who he is. Our creator God, our light, as well as our redeemer, our way maker and miracle maker. And then Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." And in Tom Wright's version, it reads, cheer up, and I just love that. Jesus bestows a blessing on them. He makes his compassion to them clear. He says, I am here with you, I care for you. And he's patient with the disciples. And he's patient with us too. In Isaiah 43:2, it says, when you go through the deep waters, I will be with you. And the disciples have been summoned to pass through the deep waters, and Jesus offers calm reassurance to them. We too are encouraged to take a step out of the boat, to walk about in the discomfort, knowing that our powerful, merciful God meets us and is with us as we try to work things out and the journey before us. Many of us feel a bit lost at this time, and that's completely okay. Perhaps we're reflecting, appreciating what we've often taken for granted, like physically being with friends and family. And perhaps we're reimagining our normal right now. We might be speaking truth and questioning the things that people say we can't do anything about. Oh, that's life. Well, that's lovely, but nothing's going to change. But God gives us courage to do these things, to ask questions, to speak truth, to reimagine, and he is here with us. Then he climbed into the boat, and the wind stopped. They were totally amazed, and their hearts were too hard to take it in. God didn't leave the disciples to struggle, but he didn't pluck them out of their situation either. The disciples lacked faith, and so do we sometimes. But God is patient with us. They didn't fully understand Jesus' power and authority. Do we grasp it? He helps us to continue our journeys, to keep going when times are tough. We just need to have a little faith, even that mustard seed of faith that God responds to. When I felt like I've been wading through mud, I've known God's gentle but powerful presence helping me forwards. Through this difficult period of social distancing, God has offered me a hand, and I've sensed his peace. And what continues the story? They brought the boat to shore and climbed out. The people recognized Jesus at once, and they ran throughout the whole area, carrying sick people and mats to wherever they thought he was. Wherever he went, in villages and cities, or the countryside, they brought the sick out to the marketplaces. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. And it strikes me that the people on the shore recognized him at once. But those who Jesus had a close relationship with, who were journeying physically with him, the disciples, they didn't really still see who he was, his identity. They lacked this kind of faith. But the people on the shore had such faith in Jesus' power, and he healed them in response. There are many people praying now and searching now for something more substantial than they're being offered. And they don't have a relationship with Jesus. Let's be receptive to how God is responding to them and be open to joining with him. Let's pray to him with urgency too in this situation, and know that God hears us and is capable of doing so much more than we can personally picture. In these stories, Jesus continued to reveal his divine identity, to reassure, to increase the faith of those around him. Can we remember again who Jesus is? He is the Son of God, who is capable of all things and more than we can imagine. We have His Spirit with us as we go ahead with some uncertainty and step out of the boat. Today we're aware lockdown is being reviewed, we're being updated, it's being adjusted. Perhaps we are expectant, but we're uneasy as well. When we are in the sea, on a difficult journey, in challenging seasons or moments in our lives, God is close. And that's not just fuzzy thinking and fluffy words. This is truth. And He's up for offering us courage, strength and peace. And the journey ahead may look a little unsteady, but God calls us forward and He's with us too. And here are just a few questions that you might like to think about now and during the week. Where do you see God's glory revealed? Is God calling you to step out in an area of your life? And how have you noticed God's presence during this period of social distancing?